Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to go over the top 10 bounce back fantasy players. Now, there are some other guys who could obviously be factored into this, but we're going to look at the top 10 in terms of guys who have been trending downward over the last 3 or 4 seasons, but do have a higher ceiling and are being discounted with their ADPs. So this should help you find some value in your drafts, and it might help you plan out your picks a little bit more if you can find some of that value later, but you're also going to have to take into account that ADPs will change, and you might have to reach a little bit on some of these guys compared to where they are currently going. But we're going to start off the list at number 10. And at number 10, we've got Rickard Rakell. He's a player who is currently unranked in terms of ADP, so doesn't have an ADP yet. And he's a guy who's bounced every now and then for a decent season. You can see back here in 2020 had a decent season, and then in 2023 he had a really good year. Now he had a career high in that season with 60 points in 82 games. He averaged almost 3 shots per game and 1.72 hits per game. So that would be his ceiling, and he wasn't really close to that last year as we take a look at his numbers. 37 points, 15 goals, 22 assists in 70 games is really underwhelming. Only 6 power play points. 2 game winners is all right, I guess, but you're really not getting a lot of anything that you would have owned him for. The shot volume is down to 2.36, but one of the things to take note of, someone's going to have to take a step up since Jake Gensel is gone, and I could see some increased power play time for Rakell. He used to be a shot volume guy. That would be one of the main things that gives him his fantasy floor and give you some value in points leagues or categories leagues, but shot volume and hits are crucial to make him impactful in categories leagues. Power play time and usage in the top 6 will dictate how valuable he actually becomes, but you can see here huge regression from year to year. They do need someone to step up, and if he's one of the few right shots that they could potentially use on that power play, other than obviously the 2 defensemen that quarterback it, that could be a nice spot for Rakell if he can get that on the power play this year. But this is a guy who should be at least thought of in terms of deeper leagues when you're thinking about deeper value plays on the wing. Center, right wing, apparently dual position eligible now. I don't know why. I don't think I've ever seen him play center, but with that said, he is a little bit more valuable because of that. Now, up next, we have a player who a lot of you might have forgotten about in terms of fantasy, but probably not in terms of just like he's always out there on social media. Trevor Zegras. He had 61 points in 75 games his rookie season in 21-22, followed that up with 65 points in 81 games the next year, but last year faced an injury that saw him play only 31 games. He had 15 points in those 31 games, 6 goals, only 1 power play point, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, his 3-year average is 0.75 points per game, which is not bad. It's fantasy ownable. It's not the best. And then last year, you can see here, he was at 0.48 points per game, so well below that. So he is a candidate in the sense of he's well below his 3-year average point per game average. But on top of all of that, he's a young player who hasn't really found that breakout season yet. I mean, you can say 65 points is a breakout year, but you look at his skill level and the fact that he was, relatively similar to Jack Hughes at the National Developmental Program in, before his draft. So he could be relatively higher in terms of point per game. He could be above a point per game guy. And the one reason why he took such a regression last year is the power play points, obviously. So in that 21-22 season, he had 17 power play points, 9 power play goals. He was 88th percentile in power play production. Last year, only 1 power play point, 49th percentile there. And that's obviously going to crush your fantasy ownability. So this is a younger player with obvious talent who's yet to reach his full potential. He's being discounted right now. This was old. He was previously unranked. Now he's climbed up to 187 ADP, which is still value if you're looking to fade those centers and bet on upside later in your draft. And that's typically where I do like to bet on upside and take a little bit of risk. But you can see the downward trend over the last couple of seasons. This is prime for a bounce back season, especially one where the Ducks are going to favor their younger players and try to get them into more action. Now, the only other thing to mention here is the games played. He was injured last year, so this is a little bit lower than what you'd like to see. But if he is healthy, that should provide some value, especially based on where he's going at 187 ADP. Now, up next, we've got a defenseman, and a lot of you are aware of how good this guy is. He's going at ADP 69.6, Mikhail Sergachev. So ADP 69.6 is priced in. Now, he should regress back up. You can see here he went from a 64 down to a 52. Now, this was the season where he took over the #1 power play spot in Tampa Bay and was very productive there. Then he obviously had a little bit of injury trouble last year, had a gruesome knee injury at Madison Square Garden. And then obviously even before that was losing the power play one spot to Hedman, as Hedman was, finding that form again. And Hedman is obviously the guy on that power play now. But Sergachev comes over to Utah, and there will be a little bit of a battle between him and Durzi for the number one power play spot. But if he gets it, that would be incredible value for him. That's the question, though. Does he get that top power play spot? Durzi was pretty good there. I would imagine they're going to try Sergachev there and maybe alternate between the two of them. But we'll see if he does get that spot. If he does, this will be value. If he doesn't, that will be pretty risky where he's at. Now, the shot volume, very low. 1.56 is not really good enough for a defenseman being picked in that range. The hits is okay at 1 hit per game or thereabouts. Blocks are really nice, 2.03 blocks per game. Point per game, pretty low. And as I pull up his previous seasons, he was a guy that always had a good peripheral floor, and then he popped off for that one offensive season where he was the power play quarterback, 64 points in 79 games, 27 power play points that season. So that's what his ceiling should be in terms of what he can provide for the Utah Hockey Club. I don't really understand why they don't have a name yet, but with all that said, he's going to be surrounded with some talent, guys like Clayton Keller, guys like Michelli, who's a good power play guy, maybe even Logan Cooley, Krause, etc. A lot of those guys are a little bit underrated on the power play. So to get this guy, I would probably fade this ADP a little bit. This is a lot of risk involved in terms of him getting the number one power play or not getting it, and the shot volume was very low that particular season. But with all that said, this is his ceiling, and he wasn't really close to it last year. He put up one of his lowest seasons in the last 5, and this is a prime candidate for a breakout because obviously coming over to a new team, higher role, higher usage, higher ice time, and then, there's going to be some level of adjustment period. But after that, if he can get that number one power play spot, his numbers should climb well above this 0.56 point per game number. Now, up next at number 7 is a guy that we've talked about. I talked about him last night in my ADP video, is Elias Lindholm. Unfortunately, there's 2, so I got to filter this out. But Lindholm is a guy that he had that one breakout season. But he's had a steady downward trend pretty much. There's a little bump here in that one season where he went off, but even then he's still been trending downward, especially over the last 3 seasons, and Calgary's struggles had an impact there, and he never really fit in with Vancouver. Now the shot volume is solid, not great, but solid. 1.19 hits per game is pretty nice for a forward, especially a center. Now, the ceiling is around 1 point per game and around half a goal per game. He had 42 goals in 21-22 and 2.87 shots per game that season. In that year, his power play numbers, he was 88th percentile, and that will be a factor here with his value. He's going to get potential exposure to Pastrnak in that number one power play, and that is maybe the reason he was going at ADP 108. But as I mentioned in last night's ADP video, he's fallen to 138 in ADP. So he was this is right around where I think he should go based on the fact that last year Charlie Coyle and even Pavel Zacha became fantasy relevant playing with Pastrnak and Marchand and those guys. But with that said, he's been dropping in drafts, so he could provide even more value if he's around 138 ADP. This is a guy who you're betting on upside, so I wouldn't necessarily take him too early. You want to take him in that range where you're accepting some risk and where you can factor in the fact that he may or may not be that guy on the top power play that's getting all those those points and whatnot. 12 power play points last year is okay. It's not great. He should get a bump in that regard. His shot volume has never been elite level, but 2.87 is a nice ceiling, I guess. I'd like to see him around 3 shots per game, and that is around 3 shots per game if he's going to get back up to his ceiling. But relatively healthy over the last couple seasons, so that adds to his value as well. But he is a single position center, which limits him a little bit. But should be a guy with the right players around him that gets that offensive bounce, and if he can increase his shot volume, he can get back maybe not to a 42 goal pace, but up above 30 would be nice for him. Up next, we have a defenseman, and I talked about his partner in a previous video, but this is Shea Theodore. So you can see a slight downward trend and then a slight uptick last year, but I don't think we've seen the best out of Shea Theodore yet. He probably will be at least one of the 2 power play quarterbacks, but it looks like they went more with Theodore than they did Pietrangelo last year. So 93rd percentile in the power play, 98th percentile in assists, absolutely no hits to speak of. The blocks are okay. The goals were really, really down. 5 goals on the season last year. So that's where the value lies. He's getting the power play time. The power play should be improved. They've got Tomas Hertl. They've got Jack Eichel healthy. They should have Mark Stone healthy. And they have Shea Theodore probably quarterbacking that power play. So that's where you would find some value, is an increase in goal totals. If he can hit at all, that will bump up his completeness rating. The problem with him has been staying healthy. 73.2% of his team's games over the last 3 seasons. That's a little bit concerning, the fact that you're going to draft a guy and then he may or may not be in your lineup. But he should be the power play quarterback on a pretty good team. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, if he cements himself at that power play 1 quarterback at ADP 109, that's where he's going now. So he's jumped up from 126 to 109. So people are factoring that in. If he is the power play quarterback, that 109 is not a bad spot to pick him up. He'll be a D2, maybe a D3 for you in your leagues. But if he loses that power play time to a guy like Pietrangelo or somebody else, I don't know who else they would use there, but if he does lose that power play time, or if he gets injured, that will be a little bit risky at ADP 109. So I would like him in this range at the 126 mark. If he starts to creep up even ahead of that 109 ADP, I would look to fade that just a little bit. But there is significant bounce back potential, just specifically in goal totals, and that would be a place where you can find some value. His best offensive season in the last couple of years was back in 21-22, where he put up 52 points in 78 games with 14 goals. So that's where he could potentially rocket back up from 5 to 14. That would be a nice value play for you if you can get that goal production back up to where it should be. He's never been much of a hitter, so I don't really expect those to come up. Now, up next, we have a player who I've always been kind of high on. And last year, he was dealing with a neck injury, so that limited his production in a year where he could have obviously been one of the bigger factors on a team that was very good for Winnipeg. Nick Ehlers has always been a guy that I've gone to. I believe he used to be dual eligible. Maybe he's not anymore, but this game's percentage is a little concerning. That's what I was talking about with the neck injury. He's missed some time over the last couple of years, and that could potentially explain this drop from a 68 all the way down to a 51 in this combined ranking. He does still shoot the puck, so 92nd percentile there. The power play numbers are a little bit low considering what he can do, but one thing that you should take into account, his career best fantasy season was a few years ago in 21-22, where he put up 3.95 shots per game. He was 99th percentile in that metric. 28 goals in 62 games. That was 96th percentile. So the issue's been the health. He dealt with that neck injury last year that plagued him for most of the season, but if he's healthy, he likes to shoot. And even in a year where he wasn't healthy, he was shooting almost 3 shots per game. So that's going to give you a nice floor in your category leagues. And if you're in a points league that weighs shots pretty heavily, that's going to help add to his value. And at ADP 140, you could do a lot worse. He's usually been a guy that's been a waiver target every now and then. He usually ends up on waivers, but then gets grabbed pretty quickly. So he's not necessarily a guy that you always have to draft, but if you factor in his point ceiling and his shot volume ceiling, that's where you could find some value on this player, going from a 51, maybe back up to a mid-60s player in terms of combined rating. 7 game winners is nice in a somewhat down year for him, and he still had 25 goals and 61 points in 82 games. So really not bad in a quote-unquote down year. If he has a good year, that ADP is going to look real nice for you. Up next at number 4, we've got Roope Hintz. He's been slowly trending downward. So 63, 63, 59, down to a 50. And one of the things that I've noticed is that while he's been healthy, he's been very good. But a couple years ago, he was pretty much missing every other game, in and out of the lineup. He still was close to a point per game that season. So even when he's not healthy, he's relatively productive. You can see 0.81 point per game. The goal total's 92nd percentile, 30 goals in 80 games last year, 65 points in a quote-unquote down year, 19 power play points, 6 game winners is really good. Shot volume is a little bit low. That top line in Dallas is going to be interesting because he's been playing with Robertson and Pavelski. Pavelski's gone, so they're going to have to put somebody else up there, but he will get top line minutes. He will get top power play time. And as I mentioned, the last 3 seasons in goals, 30 last year, 37 the year before, and 37 in 21-22. So a very consistent 30-goal scorer. I'd like to see his shot volume closer to 3, but if you're in a league with faceoffs or plus minus, he's been very good in both of those areas as well. So at ADP 94, that's the main reason he's on this, for value reasons. He's been a guy who's been as high as a 4th or 5th round pick in previous seasons. Now he's going in the 8th round, 9th round range. So this could be a value play just to find that center, playing on a top line, top power play, playing with an elite level winger in terms of goal production with Jason Robertson. And he's been trending down. This is a file where I would definitely expect regression back up to the mean in this low 60s range. Up next at number 3, we've got a player that I've previously talked about in years past, Alex DeBrincat, but he's on a 3-year consistent downward trend. That's a theme here. So another theme is that 21-22 season being a breakout year. A lot of guys in this list have had that, and then they've been trending downward over the last couple of seasons. So that's the case with DeBrincat. He is relatively healthy, so 100% of his team's games over the last 3 years. He's dual position eligible. That should provide value for you as well. Shot volume was pretty good last year, 2.89 shots per game, 93rd percentile there. Really good across the board in terms of the offensive metrics, but his ceiling is a little bit higher than that. So down year in terms of goal production, 27 goals last year is probably his floor. He's hit that twice in the last 3 years, but his ceiling, and that was 21-22 again, but 41 goals was his ceiling in terms of goal production. That season, he was 0.95 points per game, half a goal per game, 3.29 shots per game, 95th percentile on the power play, and 1.23 hits per game. Those hits are something that he used to do a little bit more, and if he could return to that, that would obviously add some value in categories leagues. If you could expect that ceiling level, he'd be massive value around the mid-80s ADP that he's going at right now. He has been healthy, the dual eligibility is helpful, and he's playing with some elite level players. The problem is, last year he was taken off that top power play unit and put on power play 2. If that happens again, that would obviously diminish his value. So there is some risk around this ADP that he doesn't stay on that top power play. But if he does, he's playing with guys like Patrick Kane. He's probably playing with, I don't know how they're going to handle Raymond and DeBrincat both being right shots. And Raymond had an, obviously breakout year last year, 72 points. So if they can give DeBrincat a look on that top power play, this is a really good value for him. If they don't, this is a little bit risky, but you're still getting really good game volume and dual eligibility, so that should make up for whatever deficiencies would be in his power play numbers. Now, up next at number 2 is the guy on the thumbnail, and that is Mika Zibanejad. This is a house account for me. I watched the Rangers religiously over the last number of years, so basically my entire life. Zibanejad is a guy who has popped in years past. This is 2020, 88.46, one of the top players in fantasy that year, and I'll go over his numbers in a second, but a slow downward trend, a pretty quick downward trend here, then another downward year, pops up a little bit in 2023, where he put up 92 points, and then back down to a 61. So even his floor is a little bit higher than some of the other guys on this list, but Zibanejad, back in 2021, 1.08 points per game, 50 goal pace, 3 shots per game, 97th percentile on the power play, and that season 1.35 hits per game. You can see that is very far from where he is now, 22nd percentile, 0.6 hits per game. So he stopped hitting. He kind of stopped shooting a little bit. Not crazy, still 2.73 shots per game is pretty good, but above or around 3 shots per game is where he should be. And when he shoots like that and he has a shot-first mentality, he is capable of a 50-goal pace. He just hasn't hit that over the course of a full 82-game season. And that's one of the things that has been plaguing him in terms of fantasy value. But he has been very healthy, 99.2% of his team's games over the last 3 years. He's pretty good on faceoffs, not quite as good as Trocheck, but still decent. And I would think that he's very motivated this season after losing to Florida in the conference finals last year. So 1.11 point per game ceiling, 50 goal pace ceiling, 3 shot per game ceiling, 99th percentile power play ceiling. He's cemented on that top power play as they haven't really changed anything. They're not going to change anything. And even if they do, they're not taking him off of that. He sets up in his office and cranks those one-timers away. And that should be music to your ears at ADP 72.6, which is where he's fallen to. So this was previous, and now in the recent ADP video, we went over how Zibanejad has fallen from 64 down to a 72. And if he continues to fall, he'll provide excellent value for you. This is a guy I'm definitely looking at in a bunch of different drafts. Maybe a little bit less valuable in categories leagues where he doesn't hit or block, but still in points leagues where you're fading or you're getting extra points for power play goals, that's going to be a thing that you're going to look at Zibanejad for. In that ADP, that should be huge value. Now, up next, we have a player that I'm very high on. all of you should be high on him as well. And there is a case to be made that this is going to be potentially the steal of the draft if you can get him around this ADP. So Timo Meier, dual eligibility, left wing, right wing, 3 shots per game last year is nice to see in a somewhat down year. 1.61 hits per game last year, 94th percentile in goals, but he's been on a steady downward trend over the last 3 seasons, down from an 83 to a 65 in this combined ranking. So what is his ceiling? What did he do in that 21-22 season? 4.23 shots per game. That was elite level, top 5 in the NHL. 2.1 hits per game, 67th percentile in blocks, 96th percentile in goals. He had 40 goals in 78 games. That was his last season with San Jose. He was their power play feature. He had 23 power play points and 17 power play goals. That's excellent if you're in a points league that weighs those heavier. And he certainly was not playing with Jack Hughes back then. So not a lot of talent on that Sharks roster that season. If he comes even close to this, he will be a huge player for your categories leagues and banger heavy points leagues. The best part about this is that Timo came alive after the trade deadline last year when they traded away Tyler Toffoli. 22 games, 16 goals, 9 assists, 25 points. That's a 60-goal pace, 1.13 points per game. And it sounds like he finally flashed a little bit of that old Timo now with New Jersey. So the first time we've really seen that pace out of Timo in New Jersey, and it came in the post-trade deadline part of last season. So let's hope he continues that into this season, and that you can still get him at around 62.5. So that's where he was going. He's now down to a 72.2 ADP. So that's something to keep an eye on. And if he continues to stay around that ADP, he should be value, but I would reach on him a little bit in maybe the 5th round, maybe even the 4th round, depending on your league and how these ADPs continue to trend. But this is a guy who has previously been a 2nd or 3rd round pick in years past when he was around this level, this 83, 78 level. He was around a late 3rd, early 4th, or even sometimes in the late 2nd round, early 3rd round. So if you can find that 4th, 5th, 6th round value, that would be huge. And obviously you're looking at the New Jersey Devils this year as a team that should have multiple close to point per game guys. Bratt, Hughes, Timo Meier. There could be others. Dawson Mercer could be a nice bounce back candidate, playing in the top 6 finally. He's dual eligible as well. So there should be a lot of offense to go around in New Jersey. And I would expect Timo to factor in on their power play, which he kind of didn't last year until that point. So the power play numbers are pretty decent considering the fact that Toffoli was on it for a long time. 52 points in 69 games is not bad. 17 power play points in that stretch is not bad either. So this is a guy that you should have on your radar. He should be continuing what he did from the second half last year. And at ADP 72 or even ADP 62, this would be really excellent value. That's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you got something out of this. If I left anybody off the list, let me know in the comments section below. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.